Hello everybody. So we're going to be working on the notes for 1-3, which is going to be distance and midpoint. And today we're going to be specifically talking about midpoint. Okay, so I'm going to walk us through these notes to start. So the first thing it's asking us to know is what are congruent segments? Well, congruent segments are segments that have the same measure. Now, it's really important, that's not an M, it's really important that we understand what congruent means. Okay, congruent means the same shape and same size. You can almost think of it like the word equal, but for geometry. So geometry, we're going to be talking about things that are congruent, much more than things being equal. Okay, whereas algebra, you use equal a lot because of equations. Well, in geometry, you use congruent a lot. Congruency is going to be something we talk about quite a bit. So yeah, same shape, same size. Let's do an example here. So let's go with line segment, we'll call it BL, I guess. BL. And we'll say that's 6 meters long. And over here we'll have another one. Okay, and we're going to call that DT. And line segment DT is also 6 meters long as well. So the symbols for that, let me zoom in here so you see it a little better. The symbol for that is as follows. So we're going to use some of the notation that we learned in the first section. So line segment BL, we know what that means. This is the symbol for congruent. It's an equal sign with a squiggly above it. And then DT, or tilde, I guess, if you want to be specific. And line segment DT. So this is the symbol here. This says BL, line segment BL, is congruent to line segment DT. Okay? All right, so that's the first part. Let's zoom back out here. Now we have bisect. Well, to bisect means to cut something in half. So if you're bisecting something, you're going to, in essence, create two things that are going to be congruent to one another. Okay? At least when it comes to line segments, that's what's going to be happening. So let's create an example here. I'm going to zoom in a little more. Okay, let's go with this. We'll go with let's go with a line segment. We'll call it AZ. Okay, and we're going to have a line going through it. We'll call this line CK. It's a K, trust me. And it's intersecting the line segment at point G. So I'm going to use these little pieces of notation here, these little tick marks here. This shows us something. This tells us that this line segment is the same length as this line segment. That's what these two marks indicate. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make a statement. We're going to say this line, right, this line bisects this line segment. So let's say that. We're going to say line CK using the notation we learned in section 1. And that's line CK, excuse me, bisects line segment AZ at point G. Okay? So this is where it's being bisected. And this is actually what we're going to be talking about. This is what's going to be called the midpoint. So G would be considered the midpoint of line segment AZ because it's in between, equally in between A and Z. It's equidistant from both points. Okay, so midpoint. Midpoint is going to be a point on a segment that divides the segment into two congruent segments. And an example of that would be point G up ahead. So let's do another example. Let's say we have another line segment. Let's call this one KR. And we have a point in the middle. We're going to call that B. And we're going to say these two are the same. We're going to say KB, line segment KB is congruent to line segment BR. And that means that B is the midpoint of KR. You see that? Zoom a little more. So, yeah, that's the meat and bones of this thing. This is how it's going to be really. This is what we're really talking about. These three things. So we have congruent segments, bisect, and midpoint. Okay, so this is the formula. This is kind of how we find the midpoint of something. All right, so you're going to be finding the average of the x values of the midpoints. Sorry, the midpoints, the endpoints rather. And then these are the y values of the endpoints. Find their average, and it'll be halfway in between. That'll make sense in a moment once we do one of these together. So I'm not going to do all of these, but I'd like to do enough of them where you can do the other one on your own. So let's look at the first one. We have 6, 9, and 12, 18. These are the endpoints. So given these endpoints, right, so let's just say it looks something like this. And yeah, this is not drawn to scale, so just take it for it is. So this is 6, 9, this is 12, 18. And the midpoint we're looking for is somewhere in between those two, halfway in between, right? Zoom in here, a little better. Okay, so we're going to use this formula here. We're going to use the midpoint formula. That's better, okay. So we're going to label these points. We're going to label this x1 and y1, and this will be x2 and y2. Okay, now, it doesn't really matter. Like, this could be x1, y1, and this could be x2, y2, and you're still going to end up at the same place. What you can't do is have, let's say, x1, y2, and x2, y1. That doesn't work. The twos need to be together, the ones need to be together, if that makes any sense. So let's use our formula here. So we're going to say x1 plus x2 over 2. Okay, so what is that? It's going to be our 6 plus 12, right? So 6 plus 12 over 2. And then order of operations, let's add 6 and 12, that's 18. And 18 over 2 is 9. So our x value is 9. Okay, so that's going to be our x value for midpoint. So x sub mid. And then we're going to do the y values. So we're going to say y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. And that is going to be how we find the y value of the midpoint. So we're going to have 9 plus 18 over 2. And that's going to be 27 over 2, which is 13 and a half. Okay? So it's going to be 9, comma, 13 and a half. Okay, so, and don't say 0.5, because 0.5 is that number. So 5/10. Anyway, so 9 and 13 and a half. So that would be the point that lies directly in between these two endpoints. So 9, comma, sorry, I wrote a little too small here. Oh well. But that's how you calculate the midpoint being given two endpoints, okay? So on your own, go ahead and do this one. And yeah, so let's go look further down here. So it's asking us, focus. It's asking us to say whether or not these congruency statements are true or false. So we're being told that BE is congruent to CD. Right? So is blue the same as red? Well, they're both congruent because they have the same length. And as we know that line segments that have the same length, guess what? They're congruent. So this is going to be true. And you can go ahead and try this one on your own as well. Oh, come on. There we go. And the back side here, we're going to do one of these. Now, these are the ones that always give students a hard time. So this might be a little confusing the first time you do it, but just be patient and you will pick it up. But this is always the area that seems to throw people off. So instead of being given both endpoints and having to solve for the midpoint, now we're being told, okay, here's an endpoint, right? Here's the midpoint. Now you need to find the other endpoint. So let me draw that out. So, okay, it's going to look something like this. And then, so I'm trying to think of how this would look. This would look like this, okay. Yep. And okay. So we have 0, 7. And that's not straight. I'm sorry. Best I can do. Come on, focus. Come on. There we go. And that's negative 1, 2. And we have to find this other point. This is the other endpoint. So instead of being told, hey, here's the two endpoints, find the midpoint, we're being told, here's an endpoint. Come on, stupid camera. Let's get a little further up here. Maybe that'll help. Yeah, that'll help. So here's an endpoint. Here's the midpoint. Find the other endpoint. So let's go back to our formula. We know that x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2 tells us the x value of the midpoint, right? We know that's x sub mid, so this will give us the x value of the midpoint. Well, we know this value, and we know this value. So we can plug those values in and solve for the missing x value, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Because we know this is x sub 1. We know this is x of the midpoint, and we know this is x sub 2. Okay? X sub 2. So we don't know what those are. So we're going to plug those in. So this 0 will become our x1. This down here, we don't know what it is, so it's going to stay as our variable over 2. And we know the x value of the midpoint is -1. So now we just solve this algebraically, and that'll tell us the x value of the other endpoint. So let's figure that out. So we know 0 plus x sub 2 is going to be x sub 2. And we know to get x sub 2 isolated, we can multiply both sides by 2. And that'll give us x sub 2 is equal to -2. So that is the x value of the missing endpoint, -2. We're halfway there, okay? Now we're going to do the exact same thing with the y values. So we know that this is our y sub 1. This is the y of the midpoint. And this is the missing y value. So we know that this is going to go in for y sub 1. Let's write that formula down. Hold on a second. So y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2 is equal to the y of the midpoint. And now we're going to plug some of these values in. So 7 will go in for y sub 1. We don't know what the y sub 2 is. It's y sub 2 over 2. But we do know what the y of the midpoint is, which is 2. And now we can just solve for y. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to multiply both sides by 2. And we're going to get 7 plus y sub 2 equals 14. And then we're going to get y sub 2 by itself by subtracting 7 from both sides. And we're going to get y sub 2 equals 7. So now we have the value. So we actually just solved it. It wasn't really that complicated. Setting it up is the hard part. So you really need to take the time to draw a picture, hopefully better than mine, because that's definitely not, doesn't look proper. And then I think that'll make it easier for you. As long as you identify what the endpoint is, what the midpoint is, you can then find the missing value. Okay, so take some time to look at this example. You're going to need it to finish this next one on your own. And yeah, so I'll be posting some homework today as well, and that's going to be due beginning of next week. All right, hopefully this was helpful. Thanks, guys.